The story of the founding of Hogwarts is wrapped in lore and mixed with a copious amount of historical context. Today, on The Sword and the Ring, we'll take a look back at some of this and try to paint a clearer picture of how the Great School of Magic came to be. Wands at the ready, and to start, let's examine the time period we'll be talking about. In the 9th century AD, 400 years after the departure of Rome from England and still 100 years before the arrival of the Norman conquest, Scotland was a mixture of tribes and kingdoms. These people were almost constantly at war with each other or the Anglo-Saxons in the south. By the late 800s, however, King Kenneth MacAlpin and Donald I attempted to unify the Scottish tribes under the name Alba. This is the land known as the Scottish Highlands and is where many Scottish towns first developed. In the late 10th century AD, Alba had spread to encompass much of the lowlands previously held by Anglo-Saxons, and this is where our tale begins. In the midst of this expansion in political and religious infighting, a powerful group of people remained hidden. They could spark a fire with no flint and wash their clothes without the need for a creek bed. These were the witches and wizards of Scotland. Among them, 4 unique individuals arose who studied and learned many aspects of magic. However, they had a growing problem as the population continued to expand. They did not have a means of passing on this knowledge without facing persecution and judgment. Thus, the founders, Rowena, Godric, Salazar, and Helga, met to devise a solution. After some discussion, the 4 settled on the idea of a school for witches and wizards, but they needed it to be hidden away from those not born with the gift. One night, Rowena had a dream, and in the dream she was led to a particular spot which would be perfect for their needs. She led the other 3 to the spot, a cliff overlooking a massive lake in the Highlands. Luckily for the magically gifted, there were many lakes and lochs and rivers and inlets and streams throughout the Highlands, so this one lake would not be particularly crowded. At the spot, half buried in the dirt, was a curious disc. It was round, and on top of this disc that the founders would build their school. You see, this disc was a pensieve, and as you may know, pensieves are used for accessing memories. This would be an incredibly useful tool in their administration of the school and passing on the multitudes of knowledge the wizards and witches had gathered. As the school was built, each of the founders added their own personal touches. Rowena Ravenclaw ensured the castle would never become boring by enchanting an ever-changing floor plan. Godric Gryffindor's hat was made in the enchanted sorting hat to assign incoming students to their houses based on their personality traits and desires. Helga Hufflepuff designed the kitchens to allow a safe and secure place for house elves to live and work free of cruelty or malice. And Salazar Slytherin designed the infamous Chamber of Secrets not, initially, as a home for a basilisk or his heir, but instead as a place for him to teach his students the dark arts. So it was that even though they sat removed from Scottish and English tribes and kingdoms, they felt a very similar conflict arise, as some people only ever want to associate with their tribe, and others want to teach and learn from those outside. Strife broke out among the founders when Salazar proposed only allowing pureblood witches and wizards into the school. This was immediately contested by Godric, as he supported the expansion of the magical world. Rowena and Helga were caught in the middle, but I imagine Helga would have easily sided with Godric. This led to the transformation of the Chamber of Secrets and the expulsion of Salazar from the school. Hufflepuff would go on to be remembered through her affinity for food spells, many of which are still used in Hogwarts feasts. Ravenclaw would mostly be remembered for her daughter, Helena, who, as I've covered before, became the Grey Lady. Gryffindor was remembered not only by the use of his hat, but he was also known as the best duelist of the time. Thus, he was known also by the appearance of his sword to any true Gryffindor in need. Slytherin, meanwhile, may have left the school, but his legacy would continue on in many ways. First, his house was known for its affinity with the dark arts. Second, his Chamber of Secrets was critical to the rise of one of the greatest Dark Lords ever. And in that same vein, several of his family heirlooms ended up in service to the same Dark Lord. And yet, outside the grounds of Hogwarts, the Kingdom of Scotland and the British Empire would grow and change through the centuries, with few ever knowing about the hidden school for the magically gifted among them. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was fun to dive into the history of Scotland and weave a bit of a tale around a story that many of you probably already knew. I'll be with you next time on The Sword and the Ring.